Hello and welcome to Florida Basketball Hour. I am Neil Blackmon, Saturday Down South. On this episode, I'm going to be joined by Graham Hall, 247 Sports. You guys know his work. He's awesome. Covers Florida basketball, Florida football. Does a great job over there. Introduce Graham again when we get back. If you are new to the show, make sure you do all the things that help keep us going. Go to YouTube at Florida Basketball Hour and go ahead and pound that like button. That's very helpful. Helps us generate some sponsorships, we hope, that'll keep us going as we enter kind of season 8. We'll also want you to go to patreon.com/FloridaBB Hour. If you like what you hear here, you'll get all kinds of exclusive content there. My longtime partner, Eric Fawcett, has done a series of videos lately. One on Alex Condon kind of being a really underrated piece defensively on the national scene, which I think everybody should watch. And then also like a series of Thomas Hauk videos. I think we're only like halfway through the Hauk stuff he's going to drop this summer. A deep dive into Arturas Budajevis, the kid from Lithuania that's signed, the big, who I think will replace Micah Handlockton's minutes, and a guy I think they can get 9, 10, 11 quality minutes from as things move forward next year. So all of that's at patreon.com/FloridaBB Hour. There's 3 membership tiers. It is the best way to support Fawcett and me as we continue our podcast. If you join at the lowest tier, you're not going to get all the film studies, but you're going to get a lot of stuff. If you join at the second tier, you'll get most everything. And then like the super crunchy, sicko deep dive stuff, along with all the videos I'm going to do on like the SEC offseason and grading everybody's offseason. All of that would be at the top tier. So 6-man club is your top tier, Rowdy Reptile the second, and then your final tier is your Game Day Gators. Anyway, worth it. Patreon.com/FloridaBBR. There is a discount if you join and you pay for the entire year all at once. Okay. That is kind of it for intros. I want to get in to the good stuff here as we get ready to talk to Graham. I think, maybe at the top, get into some scheduling stuff just because people have been asking and Mark Long and Graham, I'm on the first to break the story that Florida will open their season against Miami back down in Amelie. I know they call it like Benchmark now, whatever they're calling it. It's just going to be Amelie to me because I can't keep up with all the sponsorship changes. But, Gators getting the season going where the last one ended and playing a Hurricanes team that's going to be pretty stacked. Like I think going to be a top 20 team, has a chance to be a top 15 team. I think with kind of depending on like where is Caleb Gaskins, how good is Caleb Gaskins? That's the top 15 freshman that obviously Florida recruited, and he chose Miami, stayed home, went to the U. Florida probably could have landed, I think, Caleb had they gotten into the NIL bidding war with Miami. Florida does not do that on high school players under Todd Golden. We can get into whether you guys think that is a sound strategy. It's pretty hard to argue with back-to-back 1 seeds and a national title. But I understand that people like to land splash recruits. I just point out that a year ago, Florida landed 2 top 50 recruits and they retained both of them this offseason. So it isn't as if Florida ignores high school recruiting. And they did have Caleb Gaskins and the Boozers on campus. They weren't going to land the Boozers vis-a-vis dad's alma mater against Duke. Just kind of lost that one organically. And then a couple other guys, Cole Kluwer, guys like that, where they could have gotten in bid wars and won, but they're not going to jeopardize like the long-term health of the program and kind of disrupt the NIL hierarchy for a player. They're not going to overpay a freshman and then potentially disrupt the locker room with people going, why'd you pay this much for this guy? Anyway, Miami they need guys like Caleb Gaskins. They needed Sheldon Henderson. So their approach to building a little bit different while they build their program, and I think that makes a lot of sense. They're going to be a really good team. Florida's familiar with some of their guys. Obviously, Florida played Sheldon Henderson last year in the big win in Jacksonville that Florida led pretty comfortably the whole way. Samto Cyril, obviously the Georgia transfer. Florida's familiar with him. But I think the bottom line on this is, there's no doubt in my mind that Miami is going to be a good team. It's going to be a challenging opener. It's not Arizona in Las Vegas, and I think all of us can agree that that's a good thing. But it's also like still going to be an opener against a team that's probably going to be ranked in the top 25. Obviously, you're going back to where I mentioned, back to where last year's season ended in kind of stunning heartbreak. No Iowa transfers on Jay Lucas's squad, but they're building something. Jay Lucas, Eric Pastrana, one of the nation's best assistant coaches, at least, period, but certainly from a recruiting standpoint, is just fantastic. I mean, he had Cade Cunningham thinking about playing for Mike White. That's how good Eric Pastrana is at recruiting. And so Miami, they're building a thing. But that's one game. We could get into more schedule stuff later. ACC, SEC Challenge matchups. We're still a couple weeks out from those. So right now, there's a lot of speculation. Is Duke coming to Gainesville? I can tell you that, it's going to be surprising if it's not Duke or North Carolina. And I know there's some people that have said, well, what about Louisville? And that's also, I guess, possible because Louisville played a home game in the challenge last year, I think. And Louisville's building like a super team. So that would be really fascinating, honestly, especially if they land Milan Momcilovic, who, like Pat Kelsey, is just openly recruiting on talk shows at this point. So they're chasing him. But I think it's going to be Duke. I think it's going to be Duke or North Carolina. And if it's North Carolina, it could be a BTA situation. It really could. If it's Duke, hey, how about a throwdown with number 1 and potentially number 2 in the ACC SEC Challenge? That could be a lot of fun. There's more scheduling stuff to talk about as we get into other things. I want to get into more important stuff with my guy, Graham Hall. Graham Hall covers Florida for 247 Sport. You guys know him. I think one of the best college basketball beat writers in America. I also think does exceptional work covering the football team. He's going to give you the honest shakedown without the Summerall Kool-Aid, which you all know. If you follow me or read my stuff at Saturday Down South, you know that I'm not all in. And I'm just trying to cover this thing straight down the fairway, ladies and gentlemen. And we'll see what happens. I hope for all of your sakes that John Summerall is him. But the Florida basketball program is probably going to be the preseason number 1. Preposterous retention. Let's talk about Rueben Chinyelu, who's kind of the last piece of that puzzle. Graham did a nice piece of 247 about his early combine stuff. Graham, and welcome back to the show. His measurables are known. That, none of that is surprising anyone. He's big. His wingspan's ridiculous. But I think there were some things that were eye-opening, at least from the first 2 days.
Yeah, I think the measurement standpoint stuff is where Ruben was probably going to be the most impressive, right? The hand length, the hand width, largest hands, largest wingspan at 6'9", 6'9.25" without shoes. That's really impressive. The vertical leap, some of the athleticism, full court sprint, that I think speaks to where Ruben is as a natural athlete, not someone who's going to beat you down the court too often, not someone who is going to leap out of the building, but his ability to defend without leaving his feet, especially in today's game, is very valuable, can affect shots. And, when you talk about affecting shots, someone talked to me the other day and they were like, you you look at block statistics, that's how I determine someone as a shot effector. That doesn't tell the full story at all. Affecting shots is something that can't be quantified a lot of the time through pure box score statistics, because there certainly is the block element, of course, but it's how teams choose their shot selection based off of someone defending in the low point. So when you affect shots, you're talking about how they are choosing to attempt to finish near the rim. So he affects shots in that way and doesn't leave his feet, and obviously needs to improve upon not fouling very much, but he has the ability to do it, which is why Florida's coaching staff has drilled it into him consistently that, hey, you don't need to be a guy who leaves your feet. You can play off of 2 feet and still have the same impact. That's all the stuff that Ruben Chinyelu brings to the table. Now, that's all the good. The bad is that the game is working against him, right? 25 years ago, Ruben Chinyelu is probably a top 15 prospect, maybe a top 10 prospect in the NBA draft. But the game has moved to where 95% of the time, everyone on the court has the ability to space the floor and knock down shots from 18 feet outside. And that's just not Ruben's game. He is a traditional center, a guy who can back down opponents, clean up on the glass, finish around the rim. And that's not really a hot commodity in this day and age. It kind of has gone the market in basketball similar to the running back market, where that's a position that is undervalued right now, where if you're not someone who's going to space the floor, if you can't pass, dribble, and shoot, and I hate to be that blanket with it, but Ruben is not a guy who's going to put the ball on the floor. He's not going to facilitate well. He's not going to be a guy who looks for the pass. Those are things working against him now. That element of the way the game has moved and that where his game is at is working against him. So he has a lot to prove that someone would be willing to take a flyer on him. I don't know if it's going to be in the first round. You and I have talked about this, Neil. We don't see an avenue where he's a first round pick, maybe a late first round at best, but probably a mid second round to a late second round guy, just due to the value that his position brings. There are not many centers in today's NBA who solely are guys who just clean up around the rim and finish in the low post. So that's working against him, absolutely. But what it is good about his game has been impressive. The areas that he needs to work on, unless he has a fantastic showing in Chicago, there's going to be enough to knock him from a are you ready right now standpoint that may, if not will, convince him to go back to Florida for his senior season.
Yeah, I mean, everything you said is accurate. And, by the way, the Bismack-Biyombo, comparison gets made quite a bit. And to Graham's point, Biyombo was the 7th pick in the draft in 2011. So I think that's really illustrative. Yes, Ruben Chinyelu would probably be a top 10 to 15 pick had he been born 10 to 15 years earlier. But in that window, Oscar Tshiebwe, who's another player that Ruben reminds a lot of people of, and is not as skilled offensively as Oscar was by the time he left Kentucky, because Oscar could score pretty handily in the post in a bunch of different ways, and Ruben can't. He's pretty good when he gets to the right shoulder, but that's about it. And Tshiebwe went undrafted, right? So now Ruben is a little more athletic, I think. But Oscar has carved out, a night. He's playing on a two-way. He's inching towards the second contract. We'll see what the Jazz do. But I think NIL really changes the calculus. Everybody knows that for Ruben. And I guess the other tell, because there's a lot to talk about here. We could probably spend 30 minutes on Chinyelu, and I think a lot of people would like that. It's funny that when you have the type of ridiculous roster retention that Florida had, the only thing you can do is be nervous about what you don't have. You've gotten everything you could possibly want. So you're like, what if Chinyelu leaves? I'll get to talking about that. But I will say one tell, and he had another good game today, 13 points, 15 rebounds. But if you look at his plus minus, it's minus 16. If you look at his field goals, it was 7 of 13, and all of them were in the paint. So like the shortcomings of his game are the shortcomings of his game. There are things he can improve. But you don't play in the combine games if you're comfortable with your draft position. You just don't. Like Clayton Jr. didn't play in them last year. He knew that he was going to be a first-round pick. All his film was in March Madness, right? Ruben's played in these games because even though he was National Offensive Player of the Year, the last film that everybody has on him is Ben McCullum scheming around what to do with Rueben Chinyelu, and Ruben Chinyelu scoring 0 points, having 1 rebound, being in foul trouble, and being minus 14 in the NCAA tournament. Like, that's why he's playing in these games.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's totally fair. His game is not unique enough where coaches haven't seen it before. And he doesn't have a big enough offensive bag to be able to handle when teams adjust for him, to be able to compensate for that. And I do think that part of how inconsolable he was after the Iowa loss was not just the season coming to an end, but realizing that if he becomes more and more prolific, which he certainly was this season, and he becomes a focal point of the scouting report, that teams are able to, even when they don't have tremendous size or aren't a fantastic rebounding team, like that Iowa team was not well regarded as a front court dominant team, that with the right game plan against him, he can be nullified, if not ineffective. He's not someone who, when he gets 2 field goal attempts, is going to be able to pass out of a double and find the open man and finish with 6 assists. You can finish with 0 points if you are creating for players around you. And that's not something that Ruben does well either. I mean, when you take him out of the game, you take him out of the game. He's not going to be someone who, you double him and then he's going to find the open man, or he's going to be able to dribble out of a double team. And if you force him into a corner, he's going to make a cross-court pass. That's just not his game, or it wasn't this past season. Those are things that he, I think, realized, if he didn't already know them, but it was a wake-up call for him in that game. And he just has a lot to work on. A lot of his shortcomings, though, sometimes and I'm not saying this about you whatsoever, because we're being very blunt here and just analyzing his game. A lot of these things are not surprising about Ruben's game. Kind of similar to Alex Condon. This is someone who has not played basketball for more than, a half decade.
Right.
The growth that he's made in 5 years. I guess this is where we kind of turn to like all the reasons you should be optimistic that a guy like Ruben could in due time carve out a role in the NBA. Because when we talk about him not being ready right now, I want to make sure to make that that point of emphasis, that just because a guy's not ready right now doesn't mean that they won't be a fantastic NBA player in 5 to 10 years. The growth that Ruben has made in his game in 5 years is so impressive that the fact he's even being considered as an NBA pick right now speaks to his ability to implement fixes, areas of growth, and make strides that are noticeable in 365 days. I mean, the leap that he made from this time a year ago to this time right now is tremendous. And who's to say that in 5 years' time, and we're talking in 2031, that Ruben Chinyelu is not spacing the floor, knocking down 18 to 20-foot jumpers? I've kind of used this comparison, and you're a big NBA guy like me, that if you had told me even 5 years ago that Andre Drummond would turn into a knockdown corner 3-point shooter, I kind of would have laughed at you, because someone who played a lot like Ruben 5 years ago, and similar to a lot of other players in today's day and age, the ability for Andre Drummond to stay in the NBA came down to him being able to be more than just a true back to the basket center. So who's to say that in 5 years that's not going to be Ruben's game? He has a lot of work to do to get there, but it certainly is possible. And I think that a lot of reasons why people could be optimistic that he would reach that level is because of the growth that he's shown in the last 5-6 years. I mean, the guy was playing, at the NBA Academy in Senegal, 4 years ago? And 2 years before that, he was playing volleyball? I mean, his growth in 6 years is incredible. It's more growth than a lot of players who grow up playing the game from 6 years old show in 12 to 15 years. That's a lot of the reason to be optimistic for him. But right now, the questions and the areas of concern about his game are, I think pertinent and valid.
Yeah. And like for perspective, like Shibwe started playing in 8th grade, right? And was a 5-star McDonald's All-American. And he's played 50 games in the NBA, and 27 of them were this year for a bad Jazz team, and he still can't shoot the three. So, like, Ruben will have to. He attempted 0 threes in his last 10 games. Like, the point is, like, Ruben will have to figure out like how to shoot a little bit, I think, to stick. So that gets to like, you know, the question I get in my Twitter DMs, and I'm sure Graham gets on the message board. Well, what do you think? Well, I think that Florida will get good news on Chinyelu in the next week or so. That is my genuine expectation. Now, there are a couple things at play on that. One is he's having a good combine. Maybe he gets a guarantee from someone in the first round. That's pretty unlikely. Maybe the more likely, oh, wow, he stayed in the draft scenario is he gets some sort of early second round promise from someone. And his agent, who is a unique cat, can make the money work. The problem with that is, and this gets into another conversation that we can get into, and I want to tonight. This is why we got it. We got to get Graham Hall on so that we can have the hard conversations in the summer. Florida, like, they have the money for Ruben, and they can make him a pretty rich man. And so it's interesting. Like the calculus, I did a story at Saturday Down South on Houck. And like the calculus with Houck was Jonathan Savage said, well, we were really betting against his last contract. Like it was when he's 38 or 39, does he sign a 1-year deal and fly around when he's all tired and, you know, play a back-to-back in Memphis and Cleveland? Or, you know, is he enjoying like life one more year on campus, making fabulous money where he's the face of a university? Like, and at that point it becomes an easier. So I don't know, like Ruben's not going to get Thomas Houck type money, right? But Ruben's going to get a lot of money. And against Ruben, you're really betting against the second contract, not the last one, because, you know, it's going to take a lot for Ruben to stick through the first contract, right? I just mentioned Shibwe as a guy who's hoping to get the second one out of the two-way territory that he's been in. And, you know, if Ruben signs a second two-way, which almost never happens, right? Or he doesn't get a second contract in the NBA and he's off to Europe, he'll never come close to making the money he's going to make next year. So financially, it's a very simple decision for Chinyelu, absent some of the sort of exceptions that I talked about. And I know Graham and I have off air had, you know, some fun conversations about it. The wild card with Chinyelu is his representation, and we'll see. But I would expect good news for Florida in the next week.
Yeah, the representation and the international aspect, I think, are two really interesting conversations here, because I'll start with the international area. For those who don't know, he's not a Florida Victorious athlete. And we're probably in the next couple of years going to see it easier especially with the rise of international players coming over from Europe, especially, where it becomes a little more traditional, where international players can receive similar avenues of compensation through an affiliated collective. But right now, you're still seeing changes year over year, and guys like Ruben are not being paid in the same way that a guy like Thomas Houck is. So I think that's one as well. Then the representation angle, I want to be selective with my word choice here. Aggressive is probably the way that I would categorize it.
He advocates for his guys, man.
Yeah, and hey, there's nothing wrong with that. Like,
No, not at all.
Like getting someone to the NBA is a massive achievement. And I do think that reaching that goal may matter even more, hear me out here, to an international player than a college, than someone born in the USA. Because I do think that playing for a second national championship, and I'm not saying this doesn't mean anything to Ruben, like I don't want anyone to get it twisted out there, but playing for the University of Florida matters a lot more to a guy like Thomas Houck than it does for Rueben Chinyelu. You know, like Ruben wasn't growing up with posters of Tim Tebow on his wall. He probably wasn't watching every single March Madness. I don't know how he feels about like comfortability at UF. I'm sure he has a great experience. Don't get me wrong, but he probably doesn't view that on the similar level of importance that Thomas Houck does. He sees the NBA as an achievement of the dream for the last 7 years. And any opportunity to make it there, even if it means less money as a second round pick, is probably, you could make a good argument, matters a little bit more to him in that sense. And he's someone who has, just like Thomas Houck also, and Alex Condon, has been written off as a basketball player for the last 5 to 6 years. It really, until the last year, no one was sitting there learning Ruben Chinyelu's name and saying this could be a guy that could play in the NBA. He has a chance to realize that right now. And that's before even getting into the family angle. It always feels weird to me to talk about someone's family, but I'll lay it out here. Ruben's family is not in the United States. And as much as he could make more money at the University of Florida, he could have a little bit more multi-year security if he were to head to the NBA right now. Maybe a little bit less pay up front, but he would be able to be in a consistent place, be able to start budgeting a little bit better, move his family over to the United States if that's what the plan is, and then be able to once again bet on himself to prove that he's better than a second round pick. I would imagine that those are thoughts that he is having without knowing absolute insight into his thought process. I imagine that those are things that he's thinking a little bit more of than your traditional NBA prospect. So you factor all that stuff in there, and that's before even getting into what is one of the most uncomfortable parts, which we really never talk about, but it's worth expressing. Guys have watched, and Ruben wasn't here for it, but he certainly heard all about it. But you can see your NBA dreams at the college level erased in the blink of an eye. Like, he was around Micah Handlogton for the last, 2 years, around a guy who watched his leg snap in half, right? And Micah worked his way back. But when you're someone who is betting on themselves to come back to college and you have an opportunity to be drafted in the second round right now, if you were to suffer at some point a season-ending injury, a devastating injury that keeps you off of the floor for an entire season, you could go from being a guaranteed second-round pick to being undrafted the following year, even as good as you possibly were. So you could come back to Florida for, let's throw out an imaginary number, $1.2 million. But if that leads you to then not be drafted or not receive a two-way contract, or you're still rehabbing at this point next year where you don't get a two-way contract and you're trying to prove yourself in summer league and while working yourself back from injury, and you have to then kind of have the deck more stacked against you, then you made the wrong call. You had a chance to be drafted when you were fully healthy, be on a two-way contract, still get paid even if you suffer a devastating injury. And that isn't the equation that no one wants to talk about. And I think we're pretty blessed to not have to talk about injuries too much with Florida's roster, because outside of Micah, knock on wood, this team has been very blessed and fortunate to not have significant injuries the last couple of years, because they happen around the country. They happen at a high rate. Florida fans certainly know it from watching the Mike White era. The injuries are that unknown for a guy that's betting on themselves, that you have to calculate that risk into your decision to come back. For a guy like Thomas Houck, if he were to suffer a bad injury as a projected lottery pick, this year, he would still have teams, kind of like a Jaden Quinton's type thing, that teams would still be intrigued on taking him next year. I don't think that's the same case for a guy like Ruben right now. I could be wrong, but that's just my assessment of where things stand with him, that if he were to miss out on his senior season or miss a significant portion or be injured at this time of the NBA Combine next year, where it would negatively impact his ability to make it in the NBA, regardless of whether he's picked or has to catch on undrafted.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are all very fair calculations. I still think, the money for him up front will be higher than his draft slot, barring something around 25 to 30. So, again, like the question becomes, he's betting that he stays healthy in that scenario, right? Because if he stays healthy, I think the other factor that, Rube may consider as, hey, I might as well just go now, is kind of what's happening with Henry Vasar in North Carolina. It's like this. My stock is not going to improve. Like, Ruben could come back and consistently hit a 15 to 17 foot jump shot, and he's still going to be a fringe second round pick because he's not a guy who can really stretch the floor. He's not a modern spacer. He's more of a classic big. And to Graham's point, he's not like, he can run, but he's not going to be an electric like rim runner in the NBA or anything. So again, like, there's kind of limitations on what his actual ceiling is, which he may say, well, that errs towards just going now, because whatever I need to develop, I might as well develop on an NBA roster or in the G League somewhere. The flip side of that is, if he doesn't get out of the two-way land, he's playing for $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year in 4 years. And he's thinking, man, I should have taken that $2 million at Florida, $2.5 million at Florida, and put that in the bank, and then gotten my $2.5 million after Florida. And that's a lot more money than one contract plus 60, 70K to live out a G League dream. Right. And that's how you end up being Charles Bediako, where you're in court paying a lawyer to go back to college. Right. So Chinyelu, to me, like, I think I'm going to say strongly optimistic that he'll return to Florida next week. I at this point would be surprised if he does not return to Florida. Where are you at on that? It's okay to not agree with the host.
No, I'm still in that same camp. I would be surprised if he didn't come back to Florida. I think that from the Iowa loss to how things ended, I think that part of the equation, some people can dismiss it, but if you had dismissed it before Thomas Houck came back, you ended up looking like a fool when Todd Golden and Thomas Houck went out publicly and said, hey, listen, he was going until we lost to Iowa like that, and then the conversation changed. I do think that that's a significant part of the equation. Like Tommy and Ruben were the two most devastated players in the aftermath of the Iowa game. And that's part of the equation, because if you had asked them in February, their minds were made up on leaving Florida, and the door was about as shut as it could possibly be. Like, Florida had assessed contingency plans and prepared for that inevitable, and they weren't the only ones, that this was going to be the end, because no one foresaw the season ending in the first weekend.
Right.
Those guys, absolutely, that was a factor for them in their decision to come back 100%. So I do think that's significant. I think everything we're talking about with the money, the chance to run it back, I do think the longer as time goes on and more people have been in Ruben's ear from guys like Denzel Aberdeen, which let me just tell everyone this, Denzel Aberdeen is significant in not just returning to Florida, but helping Florida secure the return of Rueben Chinyelu. I mean, those guys are really close. Like, when Ruben when Denzel got back to campus, he spent more time over the next 2 weeks with with Ruben Chinyelu than anyone else on Florida's roster. So I think that having him, Tommy, Kondo, Urban, Boogie as well in Ruben's ear as time goes on, that's only going to help. It's going to be more and more appealing. I think being at the NBA Combine helps because he's seeing how loaded this draft class really is. I mean, he's playing against guys who he knows are going to be drafted ahead of him, and he's seeing that, hey, listen, these guys aren't going to be here next year. I have a chance to be drafted much higher next year, even if my ceiling is what it is. I have a chance to be more of the cream of the crop this time next year. So and then obviously let me just mention this, and I know that you're in the same boat. I don't want to speak for you, but I imagine that Carlin Hartman, his presence in Gainesville, I mean, there's no one that Ruben's closer with in Gainesville as a coach than Carlin Hartman. Carlin Hartman, let's be quite honest, he passed up opportunities to leave Florida for a head coaching opportunity this offseason. He's coming back to do what Tommy and Kondo and Urban and Denzel are looking to do, which is try and end this on a high note.
Right.
So there are plenty of people, from players, coaches, in Ruben's ear consistently that I do think are going to lead him to come back. I'm almost at the point where, yeah, I would be more than just surprised if he stayed in the draft. I would be, I don't want to say shocked, but I would be a little bit just taken aback in a sense, because I think there's so much working in his favor to return to Florida that there must be some factor that he holds in higher esteem than when we're laying it out here on a podcast. There must be some factor that he holds higher, and that's fine. His reasons are his reasons if that's the case. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, he's making the wrong decision, because only he knows whether the decision is right for him or not.
Right. Of course.
But I would be a little taken aback. I'd kind of be sitting here like, oh man, there must be something that he values or is weighing, that the parameters we were discussing it under, he put a little more weight on those than how we consider them.
Yeah, that's great stuff. Before we get into the next topic, and I guess there's two ways of approaching the rest of the show. We should get into the contingency plans, two of whom are on campus anyway. Really, I guess one of whom is on campus anyway, and then the other one kind of developed later in Doman Petrovic. But our sponsor, Game Time Sidekicks. Look, if you watch this on YouTube after, then you can actually see this stuff. I got my Westminster Academy one here from the, this one's pretty sweet.
That is sick. That is sick.
It's pretty good.
I'm sitting here with this relic. You ready for this one?
Okay. All right. Oh, that's good stuff.
Raleigh, first weekend in route to the national championship. Raleigh 2025.
That's good stuff. Yeah.
We got to watch VJ Edgecombe.
Oh.
We got to watch UConn.
We got to watch a basketball bounce to the moon after Edgecombe missed a dunk.
Good memory. I'll take a free Yeti, especially if it's a good reminder Yeti.
Those balls were a little overinflated. You could argue.
Where was my guy Jeff Goodman bouncing the balls on the carpet so that we knew? Someone needs to test him out.
Go to GameTimeSidekicks.com. You can get sweet, you can even get them from Westminster Academy if you just want to support Alex Lloyd, right? Or Torian Green before Cardinal Gibbons dropped a bag. Back when you dropped bags for high school.
Yeah. Good old days.
Yeah, the good old days, baby. No, so GameTimeSidekicks.com. If you spend $50, might be 60 now. I'm doing an awesome job with this sponsorship read. They throw in a koozie. That's really cool. Anyway, they have a bunch of stuff. And you don't have to just like Florida. You could be like me and just retweet Eric Church commencement speeches at UNC all the time. And it's fine because they got a zillion Carolina ones too. So check out GameTimeSidekicks.com. They're awesome. Just like Florida's retention was awesome. Also awesome is the fact that Todd Golden will be back coaching Florida next year. Contrary to popular belief, that isn't something that's going to change. I do think, and Graham Hall, the silence is deafening on the lack of an extension.
Yeah, I still think something will happen. I don't know if they're going to do the whole announcement type thing. It'll leak out there. But maybe I'm wrong here. I don't see the years changing because I think you see a lot of the, like, I think that, how often does a school announce a contract restructuring? You know,
True.
not too much unless they're trying to really flex the numbers and let everyone know, like, hey, this is what it is. But I do think that if you're Florida and you're looking at how publicized Todd Golden's contract was a year ago, like people were using those numbers not to like prop up Florida and be like, oh, they took care of their guy, Florida's paying their guy, top 5 coach. The conversation quickly, at least outside Gainesville, turned to like, oh man, he wants to go to the NBA. Look at the NBA buyout. Oh man, he could easily get poached away if they wait until this day.
Yeah.
Like, it kind of is like showing your cards in a sense. And all of this stuff is public record. So like if someone asked for it and it got done, like Florida would probably release it. But I don't think they're going to go through the whole like, publicizing of it, like what happened last year, where graphics were being made up of like what his buyout was, and oh wow, look at the NBA buyout, it's only $3 million. He wants to go to the NBA. If any NBA teams want to call him, and then you have all this speculation year over year because that stuff it rubs everyone outside of the head coach the wrong way. Like if you're Todd Golden and you're in his agent, you love it, right? But if you're a fan, you're like almost going to be dreading it year over year by being like, man, if we make it to the Elite Eight, which team is going to try and poach Todd? We're going to have to get it done again. We're going to have to open the wallets. Like that stuff it becomes draining to fans, almost where like when time goes on, if that's what keeps going on and on and on, if the results don't match for a coach, fans reach a point where they're like, man, I kind of almost wish that, we didn't have him anymore, because then we don't have to hear about this anxiety for months and months and months and everyone trying to poach our coach. Fans went through this with Billy Donovan for Kentucky, so much so that Billy Donovan had to come out and publicly lie. And I don't blame him for lying. I'm not admonishing him. But he used to come out in 2007, 08 and be like, no, I'm not having any other contact with any other schools. And yeah, that may be true that you're not, but your agent is always talking to other schools.
Right.
And so much so that you remember that the press conference that he did in 07 with the Magic, Billy finally acknowledged when he got introduced at Orlando that, yeah, he had been in contact with a lot of other schools. And that stuff it wears on fans. So I don't know if there'll be this huge publicizing of it. I do think that they'll restructure him to have some more incentives to making it back to the mountaintop. Like he made $100,000 for winning the SEC regular season title. Like I could see some of that bonus money, like the legacy cementing type money, doubled a little bit. I could see the restructuring where maybe he makes, $1 million more per year. I don't know if years will be added on to the contract. You look around at a lot of these coaching contracts, and I could be totally wrong, but a lot of them seem to like that most of them have that cutoff, it feels like, of like 2031, 2032. So I don't know if you'll get a Jeremy Foley, 10-year type deal like what, Mouse Holloway got and what Mary Wise got and a few of those coaches got. Like, I don't know if you'll get the decade-long contract, but I do think that you'll get a under-the-radar restructuring at some point. So if anyone's waiting for that, they may not get an answer for a while.
So I think a lot of what you said is right. And this isn't disagreement. I'm going to try to add color to this and just talk about like how I might be thinking about this, maybe on both ends, right? What we saw last year was North Carolina start snooping around because the stuff on Hubert was happening last year.
Yeah.
And North Carolina starts sniffing around. And Scott Strickland, very smart piece of business, says, I'm going to make the buyout immense for a college job. To where even after the first year, because I think Hubert's toast, it's just going to be prohibitive. You aren't coming after him. And then you'll get, and it's fun. It was fun. Like the North Carolina Twitter stuff was fun. Oh, we're not interested in Todd Golden either. Yeah, you don't like winning. Awesome. Good job. You're right. You're right. Your school with 7 national titles doesn't like winning. But like, what's more funny about that is that worked, right? So now what you've got is back-to-back 1 seeds, a national title, an athletic director who actually posted a photo after a second-round loss saying, like, what they've done in the last 2 years is remarkable. I just think, like, you know what the best, Graham, you know what the best deterrent to get me to, like, not leave my job at my law firm is? It's like, treat me well at comp season. Like, it's not real hard, right? Yeah. And, like, so Florida has done that in one respect. Florida's commitment to basketball is unprecedented right now. Like, Billy Donovan would, and I mean, he's alive, so we don't have to talk like him like he's dead. Billy Donovan has to be, like, astonished at, like, the resources that Florida has. Now, Billy had a nice new practice facility that at the time was one of the best in the SEC, and now, like, is fine. It's not one of the worst in the SEC. And they're getting upgrades, and that'll get fixed. But players care less about that than, like, what kind of NIL they can get. And Florida has raised that money. And by the way, like, Florida's getting a good amount of the revenue share. They're giving a very fair amount of the revenue share to basketball. I believe, educated belief, not speculative, sourced belief, that it's, like, behind Kentucky and Arkansas in terms of the rev share contribution, and that's it in the SEC. But it's not just about revenue share as long as they can raise the money, as long as they can get the money, as long as they can make the deals to make these things possible. Now, they just did it for Tommy Houck and Alex Condon and Ruben Chinyelu, by the way. If he wants it, it's there. It's not like they have to. It's not like Ruben's going to leave the combine and then they got to negotiate. The money's raised. It's there. It's ready. And Boogie Fland is back. You get the point, right? And that, not talking to Graham, just you all, the listener. So, like, to me, they've made unprecedented commitments. Good for the university. Good for Scott Strickland. That's good business. And I've talked about a lot of this on my State of the Program podcast that people like. And I appreciate you all listening and telling me that it's good for me to talk about, like, applications. My wife's a law professor. Applications to Florida after last March were at their highest point in a decade, right? Like, it is good for the entire university when you win. So Florida has probably the second or third best coach in college basketball right now. So the solution is pay him like that. And so that means a slight raise from where he's at, right? Like, he should be getting more money than John Calipari. If you're UF, you look at Cal's 7.8 and you say, we need to up the compensation to Todd. And here's why that's smart. And this is part of why I think this is not done yet, Graham, by the way, is, like, Todd has all the leverage here. He has all the leverage because he's gotten what he wanted, right? And Steve Kerr is back in Golden State, but I don't know if Todd was ever leaving once he got all he wanted to get those guys back anyway. In fact, I don't think he was. So the question is, when those guys leave, is the commitment to basketball the same, or is this a one-year thing? So Todd has a lot of leverage there to ask those questions of the administration. And my guess, because Scott Strickland really prides himself in the fact that he doesn't lose coaches because he doesn't lose championship coaches because they don't get what they need to win championships, Scott's going to figure that out. But then you've got to pay him. And the reason they should pay him the Hurley type money, right? And I don't think you even worry about the buyout that much, Graham. And here's why. Because if Kentucky comes open next year, if Tyron Stokes makes Bill Self finally deal with his heart condition, God bless him. Like, you know, I'm sorry. I'm not afraid to say these things on air anymore.
Tyron Stokes is going to drive him crazy this year.
Yeah, like, so I hope his heart medication.
That's why I'm laughing.
I hope his heart medication is good, right? I hope it's good.
I hope he takes a long vacation this summer.
For his family's sake. And like Kansas, Kentucky, those places suck in the winter. They don't have schools as good as Oak Hall. They don't have, tennis with your girlfriends in January. All right? Megan Golden. But what they got is a lot of freaking dollars, man. So if Kentucky or Kansas comes and says, hey, Todd Golden, we think you're the next Bill Self. We think you are John Calipari right around the time he left Memphis. Here's $11 million a year. And by the way, our NIL resources are absurd. Even at Kansas, we're an Adidas school and nobody likes that. Guess what? Tyron Stokes is loving Adidas now, baby. Darren Peterson loves Adidas, So the point is, what do you do to preempt that? It's not a buyout. You think Kentucky's afraid of a buyout? No. It's bottom line compensation. It's bottom line compensation. Why would Todd Golden leave Florida when he's the second or first highest paid or third highest paid coach in college basketball and he has an administrative commitment to win? Why would he do that? But Golden has all the leverage because Kansas might come open. Kentucky might come open. Maybe Nate Oates decides he's tired of being poor, right? I don't mean from a compensation standpoint, but he's a great example of it to kind of cap this rant that I'm sure Graham is just tired of hearing me talk. But Nate, what does Alabama do? We can't give you any NIL, Nate. We have to give that to Kalen DeBoer or else the Feinbaum collars get really mad. But we will pay you $11 billion a year. And Tuscaloosa is not a terrible place to live. It's pretty warm and sunny here. And you're watching your kids finish high school, right? Your kids haven't had to change schools. At some point, do I think Nate Oates is going to get tired of it and some NBA team's going to take a flyer on him? Maybe. I mean, Nate has some issues off the court that, but that's a different podcast, my man. The point is, Alabama deals with that shit by paying him money. And, it's the Rounders, let me age myself with a movie reference. It's just pay the man his money. What does Danny Hurley make? I don't know, but it's the most in the country. And what's his buyout? It's $1.5 million. Why? Because UConn's not. Oh, you're going to pay Danny Hurley's buyout? Cool. Can you pay him $60 million over the next 6 years? Well, guess what? If you can't, he's staying in Storrs, Connecticut. And let me tell you, if somebody's paying Todd Golden $55 million, and I don't think they need to up his year, but if you're paying him $9 million per annum, Megan Golden didn't leave in Gainesville. So that's the solution. That's the solution. And that's the end of my rant and my color to what Graham was talking about.
Yeah, we're gonna see $10 million $10 million per year contracts for coaches.
Right. Why not Todd Golden?
Why not Todd Golden? I do think the ones that, and let me say this on Scott Strickland real quick. And Scott Strickland, fans are obviously, they have their minds made up about him. So when I say this, am I trying to convince anyone out there? No, I'm just going to say it for what it is. And you can feel however type of way you want about it. But when revenue sharing started, Scott Strickland was extremely wise in laying out a set figure for Todd Golden, where he knew exactly what he had to work with.
Yep.
That wasn't going to change. And then you talk about security. The head coach knew, without having to look over his shoulder at how the football program was doing and what they needed to buy and what players they needed. He didn't have to look over and be like, well, hey, is our budget going to get cut if Florida loses to USF in week 2? That was never a point of concern for Todd Golden. And you have to do that with your top tier coaches who are at schools like an Alabama, like a Georgia, any SEC school, where no matter what, football is going to get the highest percentage of revenue sharing, because you're not competing with other SEC schools. You're competing with the Marquettes, the Kansases, the UConns, the St. John's, the Gonzagas of the world, who don't have to put 70% of that 21.5 million or whatever it is revenue sharing to football. You're worried about a school like Kansas that doesn't care if they go 0-12 in the Big 12 every single year. Yeah, it'd be tough for them, but Kansas is going to be driven by basketball more often than not. They have to worry about Kansas paying the coach more and then giving them more resources to build a roster for the legacy cementing standpoint. Like, that is what Florida's administration views it. And they're not looking at what Nate Oates is making necessarily. They're looking at what Bill Self is making, or Dan Hurley is making, or even a Mark Few, and looking at the treasure chest that is at those coaches' disposal, right, and then saying, hey, listen, we don't want our championship winning coach to go to a program where they can be the top dog on campus from a revenue sharing standpoint, and every bit of NIL dollars that we can bring in, 70 cents on every dollar goes to the basketball program. That's who they are competing with. And to Scott Strickland's credit, he identified that early on and made it so that it wasn't going to be a concern. Now it's going to be something that is going to have to change year over year, especially as this revenue sharing cap increases as time goes on, which it's going to. It'll be 30 million before we know it, especially if college football playoff expands and March Madness is already expanding, all the other things that are going to make money in broadcast dollars for these Power 4, Power 5 programs. That is what is going to be the consistently that they're going to have to figure out to keep a coach like Todd Golden happy, on top of paying him like a top 3, top 5 head coach in college basketball. It's your overall financial compensation. It's not the buyout. It's that, and making sure that if you want to go get a player, you don't have to sit there and be like, oh, we don't have the money, so now I'm going to have these losses on my win-loss record, so people can go on my Wikipedia page in 10 years from now and say, oh, that coach only won 19 games this year. Well, of course they did if they don't have the money to compete, and Florida has to keep doing that to make it so that Todd Golden's well paid, and then he's not concerned with his roster building abilities. So right now, when we talk about in the blanket sense of Todd Golden has it so good in Gainesville, that's what we're talking about. Not him being the number one paid coach. It's he has all the resources to compete. He has transparency on what he has every single year, and he's paid like no worse than 4 coaches in college basketball right now.
That's it. And like, again, he's got the leverage to say, like, pay me this because somebody else will, and then don't worry about it. Right. Again, like, they're not going to worry about a buyout if your compensation is high enough and you have the type of administrative commitment. And to Scott Strickland's credit, like, this roster retention is not possible without the administration going all in for them too. And that isn't just this staff. That's an administrative win. It's a booster win. It's a collective thing. But that's the NIL era, right? Like, the fear of losing the program you built motivates the spending, and should motivate the spending. And then you get guys who can find talent like Arturas Budahavis and Doman Petrovic. Talk to us about what Florida's getting here. I know you were on top of these stories pretty much throughout. Budahavis, we talked a little bit at patreon.com/FloridaBBR. We have a sweet video of him, kind of some of his weaknesses and some of his strengths. Pretty effective rebounder. Pretty effective, like, guy that can put it on the floor a little bit, but he can pick and pop. He can play the hand locked in minutes, I think. But then Petrovic is maybe the one that's super interesting to everybody.
Yeah, I think we should pat ourselves on the back. I mean, you probably have said it, but you were all over Arturas, before I was,
Yeah, that's a good win.
Yeah, you should be proud of that. Doman came on my radar a little bit later. For those who don't know, they try and keep a lot of these international ones under wraps, because the transfer portal opens while a lot of these guys are still competing overseas. And teams are in the know about what is possibly going to happen, but a lot of these teams are still playing through the end of May. I mean, some of these international teams are playing right now. And just from a general player standpoint, if you sign a new deal to leave your team in the middle of the season in the final, push trying to make the postseason in Spain or Serbia or wherever it is, that's going to rub, your team the wrong way as a player, but also the program trying to bring those players in is going to probably hinder some connections that you're going to want to rely on down the line. So a lot of these are kept very, very, close to the vest in a sense where they don't want it coming out. But now that it's out, we can obviously speak about it. Doman is fascinating. I'm interested to see how he's classified. I tell people all the time, if you're predicting what the NCAA is going to do, probably an exercise in futility a lot of the time. He is the same age as Urban Klavzar. He could end up being a junior. He could be a sophomore. I don't think he'll be listed as a freshman, but at the same time, it wouldn't shock me if that is what ends up being the case. He's someone who can stretch the floor really well. I think he's a above average ball handler. Defensively is a big question for me, just like it is with any international player who comes overseas. I mean, how are they going to be able to fare with the physical level, the switch everything, just the being able to get out and transition, know where to be without the ball, the communication aspect. Let's be totally honest. The communication aspect is probably, I shouldn't even say probably, it is tougher for anyone who comes over with a language barrier. I mean, they're more often than not going to be quiet and just let their play do the talking. That is going to be an adjustment period whatsoever. Now for Petrovic, having Klavzar here should aid that, absolutely. And I could see that the situation where they're both on the floor together a good bit because of the comfortability standpoint and having played together previously. But Petrovic is a guy that I could see filling in for that backup 3 role, if not playing the 4 in some undersized lineups, especially if you can slide either Condon to the 5 and space the floor with 5 guys who can play outside the perimeter. I think that would be a fascinating lineup. Budievich, I know you've talked about him a lot. I think he can put the ball on the floor a little bit better. May not be done growing is the other thing that I've heard. I mean, this
that's
could be a guy
Yep.
that could add another 1.5 inches to his game and be a legitimate 6'11", pushing 7 foot. And then you're kind of getting into, I love throwing this out there, you're getting into kind of where does a player see themselves in 10 years from their game standpoint? Are we talking, a Lauri Markkanen guy? Or are we talking a Franz Wagner type player? Like in 5 years, you could be seeing a guy's game rounded out like that, where they're spacing the floor and kind of doing a little bit of everything for a team. That's kind of what I see for both of them. I think that there's a lot of Alex Condon and Budievic's game, maybe without the rim running, the tenacious defense type aspect, but the ability to space the floor, facilitate at a high rate, I think is something you're going to see right away. I'm intrigued to see how Petrovic fits into the rotation, though, for Florida. I think it'll be a little bit more of an adjustment for him just off the jump, but that's what non-conference play is for. I mean, if he can figure it out in non-conference play, this could be a guy that, an end of the bench type option for you, 10th man potentially by the time SEC play rolls around. And if that happens, then Florida is incredibly deep. I mean, these guys were kind of like the cherry on the top of the roster.
Sure.
And if you get anything out of them in SEC play, I mean, that is a win. It's a good problem to have. I mean, Florida's going to have a good problem of figuring out rotations and minutes when the season gets into January next year.
Oh, for sure. Look, I think you can see the vision with Budievich in that, he's, like you said, he's growing a little bit. If he gets to 6'11", he's got good length. So, he's got good agility. He's a shot blocker. Obviously, he can shoot the ball a little bit. Didn't shoot it a ton at Malaga, we should say. Kind of shot less threes than maybe you'd expect for somebody that's reputably a pick and pop guy, and that Barca, one of the best youth programs in the world. signed as kind of a pick and pop piece. Didn't shoot it as much, but can put it on the floor a little bit. Good passer. It's gonna take him a minute. I think, Petrovic, to me at least, is somebody I would expect potentially to have a bigger impact next year, particularly if Chinyelu is back, which would be the best scenario for Budijevic, is that then they don't need him to do a ton, and if you can get him out there for 8-9 minutes a game in bye games, that's great. And just kind of get his confidence back shooting the ball, because his stroke looks really good at times, and then he kind of has inconsistent form, and the shot kind of follows that. But he can make them. And again, like, there's a lot of great tools there. It's just, it's going to have to be make the most of your 1 year with Carlin Hartman, young man, because that's going to be a big, and in a long term, depending on, like Graham said, depending on what eligibility grade he's given or what year he is, could like certainly blossom into a really outstanding player. But comes from a lot of good young clubs. So, but Petrovic is a little more polished, can do a little more, gonna have to adjust defensively. That's the biggest thing with Doman. And, we saw even with like Illinois, like there were games with all those Europeans where they just couldn't guard anyone. And then, it was like the NBA playoffs with Illinois. All of a sudden in March Madness, they're like, oh yeah, we got to play defense for 40. Anyway, but if you're on the floor with Thomas Houck, Alex Condon, and Ruben Chinyelu and Boogie Fland, guess what? You don't have to be awesome at defense. Yeah, so it's
especially if he's in there with Denzel, and with Denzel and Boogie, they'll have the best backcourt.
Right.
Where even if it's a 3-guard lineup, I mean, Petrovic can be the weak link, and they're fine.
Yeah, shouldn't have left Aberdeen out of that scenario, right? And I mean, Alex Condon, I had a couple coaches tell me that like they think Alex Condon is the best defender in the country, and it's like, they weren't knocking Ruben Chinyelu. Like, Ruben is awesome, and it was just a lot of what Ruben does is because Alex Condon kind of enables it. And if you think about it, it makes some sense. Anyway, so that's just kind of the embarrassment of riches that Florida has on the defensive side.
I mean, Condon's transition defense is better than Ruben's.
It's stupendous.
So I do think it depends on the lens that any opposing coach is talking about a defensive player. And I do think in today's game, college and NBA, you put a premium on transition defense, and Alex Condon is one of the best transition defenders in the country.
Well, we're getting closer, Graham, to kind of knowing what this roster is going to look like. Obviously, waiting on the Aberdeen thing. They'll go to court if they have to.
Todd didn't really like when I asked him that question a couple of weeks ago. You were there. I had to ask, is the local judge a last resort? And he laughed. He was like, yeah, last resort, but we're hoping it doesn't come to that. But like, you and I talked a lot last year about, everyone loves to make, and I've said this time and time again, everyone loves to bring up, oh, well, Charles Bediako, blah, 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 blah. Charles Bediako is not the precedent here. No. Rashawn Agee is the precedent here.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, Rashawn Agee is the precedent here. You file a lawsuit against the NCAA. You get the TRO in October,
right,
to drag it out long enough where that lawsuit never sees a courtroom, and then they play the entire season. Rashawn played 34 games this past season, all SEC guy. That is the blueprint for guys like Denzel Aberdeen. You don't have to have and Rashawn Agee and Texas A&M and Bucky McMillan did not get anywhere near the blowback of a Charles Bediako situation. If Denzel gets a TRO and is playing, the only people bringing up that Denzel got a TRO are going to be opposing fans in February when Denzel has, 3 steals and 15 points and 6 assists. They're going to be like, well, that guy shouldn't even be playing. But no one around the country is going to be nearly as incensed by the whole situation as they were with Charles Bediako.
And I had A&M fans engaged in all sorts of mental gymnastics and name calling in my Twitter mentions just because when I wrote an article at Saturday Down South and I was like, look, the Bediako situation is preposterous, but like when Bucky McMillan criticized it from like a press conference seat, like at some point enough is enough on the hypocrisy front.
like Bucky would probably be like, Alabama should have decided to do this in October. The only criticism I have is that they didn't figure this out 4 months ago like I did.
Right. Like,
that's the only criticism a guy like Bucky is giving Charles Bediako and Nate Oates.
Yeah, the committee clearly needs to consider the fact that they had Bediako when they played us. It's like, says the guy that whose all SEC player is playing on a TRO.
Yeah, who's on his 5th stop and got the COVID year on top of it and signed in the class of 2019.
What a time to be alive. But yeah, I mean, and the other thing is, Graham, like guys that have played as little as Denzel did have gotten waivers before. Like it's not, and that's what I think Todd's answer was like, it's common sense. I mean, he played 41 minutes. 13 of those came in an NIT game, which I won't agree with Todd that it shouldn't have been called a game. It certainly was like when UCF came into the building and ran Florida out of their own gym, they certainly felt like it was a game. Regardless of where the staff's head was. But nonetheless, his point remains that like a third of Denzel's minutes came in the NIT. When I don't know who was in the portal already for Florida, but certainly some people were all one foot out.
So I think where he has a really good point. I don't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
But like, if you're a coach like Todd Golden and you want to be seen on the level of football because you're competing against coaches who don't have to worry about football, you want there to be some uniformity in terms of the redshirt rules. Like if a football team goes 6-6 and a bunch of their players, quote unquote, opt out, or they enter the transfer portal back when it would open up before bowl season, you would play the players who have only played in 3 or 4 games, and they'd be able to play 70 snaps in a bowl game, which is what the NIT was for Florida.
Yeah.
Without having to lose a year of eligibility. That is how it shouldn't be this calendar cutoff date where a guy can't play. They should be able to play in a certain amount of games or minutes or whatever it is, whether those games happen in March, January, whenever, or in October, December, November. They should be able to play a certain number of games.
Yeah.
Where that if everything goes to shit pretty much, and you're playing in the NIT, you have a chance to at least get something out of it. If your school is going to fund travel and participate in the NIT when you could opt out of the NIT, at least let me play the guys, the freshmen, the Denzels, the Alex Lloyds, who haven't been able to play 30 minutes all season long because you were fighting for something. Let them actually benefit from something from a development standpoint. If we're going to put up, $1 million or whatever it is, just throwing a number out there, in traveling to the NIT or hosting or whatever it is, let us play the guys who didn't play all year long. So at least it's worth it for us.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're not wrong at all. And by the way, like, and that's part of, if you're an athlete dealing with this, come and talk to me. Like, because that's part of the legal argument too, is it's arbitrary. And the distinction between the two sports is arbitrary, and it's unfair. It's an unlawful restraint on the athletes that don't play football, right? The NCAA should not have a rule that applies differently to one class of athlete as opposed to the other. That doesn't make any sense. But again, Todd doesn't want to go to court. And when the NCAA wants to, they've proven they can do the right thing because they've given waivers to kids that played 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 50 minutes. Like, it's not like it's not something that's happened before. The UF isn't going to go in front of the NCAA and say, hey, do something you've never done. That's not what's happening here. So, but they can go to court if they have to, whether Todd, doesn't want to or not. Of course he doesn't want to. They will. One way or another, they're going to get Denzel Aberdeen on the floor. That's my guess. So, all right. That's it. I mean, I think we've exhausted things. Guys, follow Graham. go over to 247 Sports, subscribe. It's Lion season for football, so the message boards are a blast. And obviously you got a preseason number 1 in basketball. They'll tip it in Tampa against the U 2 days after Florida plays Georgia and Atlanta. We'll see how that goes. And yeah, Graham, thank you, buddy.
My pleasure. Always. Got a lot to talk about. Can't wait for the year to get here. I gotta say one more thing before we get out of here.
Yeah.
You mentioned Billy Donovan in the basketball practice complex. It is so fascinating to me that facility arm races are no longer a selling point for basketball.
It's crazy.
Like Todd Golden he's not using the basketball complex and whatever the impending renovation will be, which was supposed to be done, last year, and then it got pushed to February, and then it got pushed to March, and now who knows when it will happen, if it's even going to be $8 million or whatever. Like when I talked to Boogie Flan and I talked to AJ Brown last year, and I mentioned that to them, they were like, "Oh, we didn't even know it was going to get renovated." Like they're not using that in the equation, which is so fascinating to me, just in this day and age of like, it just speaks to what the priorities are for how you can sell your program. And obviously Florida has a ton to sell, but that isn't even really one of them right now, or the impending renovation is not going to be one of them. So I just want to throw that in there that, guys, it's not even on their radar when they're coming to Florida, looking at facilities and all these amenities. I mean, they want to come to a place where they can win and where they can be paid well to do it.
Well said. All right, y'all. Follow Graham Hall. Thanks for listening. Game Time Sidekicks. Check them out. It is $60, so then they get the free koozie and the free shipping. That's it. That's this episode. Thanks to Stadium Gale Network for their assistance too. Go Gators. Keep it 10 closeouts.